Jeannie Gotti used to tell me all the time that when him and his brother John were kids and they ran into my father, they didn't know if they should shake his hand or duck. That was like an ongoing joke, And unfortunately, our mentors were criminals, and we grew up to become criminals, and some of us are still criminals, and some of us aren't, And to this day, as far as the mob is concerned today, I don't know who their mentors are or whose disciples who, because I made a decision to put my recovery first. What you need to do with someone in this position that sent this email needs to do is go to a meeting. Go to a 12-step meeting, raise your hand, introduce yourself. Hello, everybody. My name is Anthony Ruggiano Jr., and I want to welcome everybody to Reformed Gangsters. And if you like my content, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. And it would be great if you became a Patreon member, get early access to my content, have Q&As with me privately or online. So please become a member. I like to keep things fresh, and I like to talk about other topics than, John Gotti. It just seems that every time I get interviewed, or a lot of my comments, a lot of my questions circle around John Gotti. And so I was thinking about it. Even when I do shows for Netflix or the History Channel or National Geographic, it's always John Gotti. John Gotti. I have a show coming out October 24th. At first, it was supposed to be Fear City 2. And what happened was we filmed it over a year and a half ago. And when they showed the uncut version to the executives at Netflix, according to what Raw Productions told me, who produced the show, that the people at Netflix loved it so much, they thought it needed its own title, so they renamed it Get Gotti. And it's not going to be Fear City 2, which Fear City 1 was really a great show also, done by Raw Production. So maybe Fear City 2 will come back in the future, but right now, the show that's coming on October 24th is Get Gotti, and I'm supposed to be in all 3 episodes. I'm looking forward to the premiere, and I hope everybody enjoys it, and I'll talk more about it as the date gets closer. But so what I'm thinking about is, disciples, like Fat Andy's disciples and mentors, all these guys in all phases of life. We all had mentors. A lot of us had our fathers as mentors, or baseball players, or athletes, but everybody had a mentor. We all had mentors, and even in the mob. So Fat Andy, and I'm gonna not use father tonight because I've been getting a lot of comments that I say father to my father too much. So I'm gonna use his name, his street name, Fat Andy, but we all know who I'm talking about. So these guys all had mentors. So Fat Andy, my grandfather died when my father, Fat Andy, was 6 years old. So at the time of my grandfather's death, his friends, Fat Andy's friends, were this guy, Larry Abendando, whose father was the Dasher Abendando, who was a member of Murders Incorporated, who got the electric chair with Lepke. His other friend was Lenny the Don, who was actually my godfather. His uncle, his mother was Jenny Maone, who was the sister of Happy Maone, who was another member of Harry Happy Maone of Murder, Inc. This is the original Murder, Inc. These guys were killers. They all got the electric chair. So these were his mentors. So he was in and out of their houses at childhood, and they became his mentors. And later on, he went to work for Charlie Wagons, who was a made member of the Mangano family at the time, and he started doing work for them. So Charlie, even Sonny Francis was another one of his mentors. He was a wise guy in the neighborhood of East New York, and at the time, Fat Andy, my father, had a choice to go with Sonny Francis or Charlie, and he chose Charlie, but he always remained great friends with Sonny till the day they died. They were best friends, him and Sonny. So those were his mentors. They were gangsters, they were killers, and those were his mentors. Moving forward, I want to talk about Fat Andy's disciples who he mentored. So in East New York, where they all come from, where Murder Inc. originated out of in Bronzeville, where the Jewish mob, Lepke's crew and Happy Mayone's crew and Albert Anastasia's crew all came out of Bronzeville. And that's the neighborhood that Fat Andy and Tony Lee and John Gotti, who came originally from the Bronx, moved into East New York at a young age. So in East New York at the time, after Fat Andy was straightened out and Tony Lee was straightened out, there was a crew of kids in East New York that were all wild kids. So it was John Gotti's crew, John Gotti, Jeannie Gotti, Angelo Quack, Sally Quack, Angelo's kid brother, and a couple of other kids. And then there was another crew of kids, Nicky Carrazza, Joseph Carrazza, Lenny DiMaria, Tony Pep, Anthony Trent Acosta, and that was another crew. And these kids, as kids, were beefing with each other. They were beefing with each other. So along comes Fat Andy. He was a mentor. Everybody wanted to be him. He was a gangster. So now they're in East New York, and he's a made man. Tony Lee's a made man. And now, just like Tony Lee and Fat Andy looked up to Murder Inc. as mentors and who they wanted to emulate and become, these crew of kids in East New York all looked up to Fat Andy and Tony Lee and Charlie as mentors and who they want to be, who they want to aspire to. These are the guys they want to be like. They want to be gangsters like them. They're infatuated with them. So, but what happened was, which is not really talked about a lot, because really nobody really knows the intimate what happened. I know because, my family was involved in it. There was conflict between these groups of kids. Between John and Nicky, they were banging heads. They became enemies in teenage years. They actually had fistfights with each other. There was actually shootings, and Freddie DiCongilio, my father's guy, got hit on the head with a hammer. I mean, they had serious beefs. And otherwise, John Gotti and all his guys probably would have winded up being with Fat Andy and Tony Lee. The only reason why they weren't was because of this conflict between Nicky Carrazza and John Gotti's crew and Nicky's crew with these beefs because of ego and who was and that was their neighbor, and they were beefing with each other, and that carried on, which I'll get into later on. So the windup is Mikey Gow, Tony's brother, brings Nicky to my father, to Fat Andy. He brings Nicky, and my father and Tony Lee take a liking to Nicky. He's a young kid, he's a teenager, and they give him a job. They give him a job picking up numbers of sport. My father they had horse rooms all over East New York, and he looked like a young kid, and he was picking up the slips in all the horse rooms that Tony Lee and Fat Andy had in East New York. And through that job, Nicky brought his brother Jojo, Lenny DiMaria, Tony Pep through to Fat Andy and Tony Lee, and they put all these guys on record with them. The other crew, John Gotti's crew, gravitated towards Charlie because of his beef with Nicky. And Charlie put them on record. And the beefs continued. And my father and Charlie had many sit-downs over these young, young Turks, whatever you want to call them, young guys that were mobbed up now, that were on record, that were mob associates, that were, earners and killers and, tough kids. And so those were their mentors. And so Fat Andy, Tony Lee, Charlie became their mentors. Jeannie Gotti used to tell me all the time that when him and his brother John were kids and they ran into my father, they didn't know if they should shake his hand or duck. That was like an ongoing joke, And they became my father's disciples, Nicky, Lenny, Jojo, Tony Pep, and they brought a whole bunch of guys with them. And next thing you know, Fat Andy and Tony have one of the biggest crews in this city, 70 guys around them, 70 associates. And I'm start working with them, and he became, and Tony Lee and my father became my mentor. And I started working with these guys as a teenager in crap games in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, number spots, and that's how my criminal career started at the same time. And so they were Fat Andy and Tony's disciples, these guys. They were taught well, they had a great teacher. And John Gotti and his crew had a great teacher, and Charlie and his brother Danny, and all of them, and let's go through now. So now their mentors are Fat Andy, Tony Lee, and Charlie, and they're these guys' disciples. And let's move forward now. Look how they all became. Let's start with John Gotti. He became the boss. Angelo Quack became a captain. Jeannie got straightened out. Their whole crew, Johnny Caniglia, got straightened out. A whole bunch of them got straightened out. My father, all his disciples, Nicky Carrazza, became a captain, a powerful captain who actually sat on the ruling board when John was in jail. John made him the acting boss. So they went from becoming enemies to becoming, he made Nicky a captain and Nicky became the acting boss. He sat on the panel with John Jr. and Gotti. And when John became, and a lot of people don't know this, when John became the boss, Nicky thought he was going to get killed because of all the beefs he had with John when they were kids. They did not like each other. There was always a rivalry between the two of them. Even when they both got straightened out in the 70s, there was a rivalry between them because they both got straightened out and they were both around Neil. They both wanted to be on Neil Della Croce's good side. And so there was always, the rivalry continued. But when John became the boss, Nicky thought he was going to get killed. And Nicky showed his mantle by meeting John whenever John sent for him. I mean, that's a gangster. When you get a call at 2 a.m. to come out to meet the boss, and that might be your death, and you get dressed and kiss your wife and kids goodbye and go to that meeting knowing that you might get killed, that's gangster. You know what I mean? So, and the reason why I'm saying that is because, Fat Andy and Tony mentored these guys. And, Lenny DiMaria became a captain and Tony Pep got straightened out and Jojo became consigliere of the Gambino crime family. So, but it all started out with them being mentored by Fat Andy, Tony Lee, Charlie, Danny. It all started out with them becoming their disciples, their associates, and that was really big. They became a very powerful fraction of the Gambino family. And it's something because I remember when Nicky got proposed, and he would come by my house on 88th Street, and he would get dropped off, and he would sit on the couch, and I would come up the stairs, and I would listen by the door, and I would hear my father telling him that he was going to be reborn. Like, this is a thing, like Fat Andy, my father, and John Gotti, and Sammy at the time, and everybody, they believed in that life. Like, they believed that they were right. Like, this was the way to go. Like, they were right. And he would sit on the couch with Nicky, and he would tell Nicky that you're going to get reborn. Like, this is heavy stuff. Like, they believed that they were going to be reborn. Like, reborn into La Costa Nostra, you're going to be reborn, he told them. And he told them that if you have any enemies, you have to forget about it. When you get made, you can't. When you become a friend, you can't take advantage and get even with people that you beefed with before you got straightened out. And he told them the rules about going with people's wives and getting revenge. And it was like, and I would be at the door listening, and it was something. It was something. But it all had to start somewhere. Like I said, getting back to mentors. We all had mentors, even legitimate people. School teachers were mentors or, whatever. But unfortunately, our mentors were criminals, and we grew up to become criminals, and some of us are still criminals, and some of us aren't, and to this day, as far as the mob is concerned today, I don't know who their mentors are or whose disciples who, but I know there's people out there that are capable of killing somebody. I know there's people out there that are killers, that are free in the street in New York. I don't think anybody's going to give them an order to kill anybody no more. I think them days are over. But there are people out there still that are capable of it. And, and maybe they'll mentor somebody. Hopefully not, but you never know. If you enjoy my show, please join my Patreon. Ask your questions live. And please join my Patreon at reformgangsters.com. So back in the day, there was a song that came out, Mr. Lee. It was called Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. You could Google it or whatever, YouTube it. And he used to play it all the time in the bar. He liked the tune. So he used to play it in the bar they hung out in. And the girls that hung out with him in the bar started calling him Tony Lee, and it stuck. But he got it from the song Mr. Lee. Other than my dad, who was my mentor, I don't know. He was such a big figure, like, I mean, I had like guys I looked up to, like baseball. I loved Mickey Mantle, so I was wore number 7 when I was in the Little League. I always liked, when I met O'Neal, I liked how he acted, like very stern and quiet, but very demanding. Like, without saying a word, you knew like it was on his mind. You know what I mean? Like that was something I looked up to. But my 2 mentors were Tony Lee and my father, without a doubt. Those were my 2 mentors. When I was little, I really didn't have, like when I was little, no, but as I got older, when I became a teenager, it would have to be Tony Lee and my father.
Did you ever have any dealings with the black guys from East New York? I'm a retired detective, and we came across guys who were doing hits back, I guess, probably in the late 90s.
No, I was in jail in the late 90s, so I was out of touch. But I know in the 70s, I go back to the 70s. I know in the 70s, my father was being followed by the FBI. And every day he would go to East New York, and there was a black bar in East New York where all these black wise gangsters hung out. And he would go in there every day, and they would follow him there. And they knew him, and he would go sit in that bar all day. And they were all junk dealers and number runners. But other than that, no, because in the late 90s, I was in prison. Yeah, I went away in 96. So I wouldn't know anybody back then.
I got a good Spanish Raymond. I got a good Spanish Raymond story. If you ever been interested, I don't want to take.
Raymond, we did business with Spanish Raymond. He was our banker for years. Our number banker for years. Spanish Raymond. How much money do you think he's got or had?
Yeah. Well, do you remember Sonny Grasso?
Of course.
Sonny's partner was a guy named Eddie Egan. Eddie Egan, he was the main character in The French Connection, which was based on the case they had.
Yeah.
So they hit Spanish Raymond for $100,000 in his house. Back at the police station counting the money, and Spanish Raymond called and said, "Hey, someone took my wife's wedding band." So Sonny goes, "I'll take care of it." So he goes to the guys and says, "Hey, listen, someone took the guy's wife's wedding band. We got to make this right. I'm going out to lunch. When I come back, let's get it in my drawer." So he comes back from lunch, opens his drawer, the ring is there. So he calls Eddie Egan in the room. He goes, "We just hit for $100,000. What kind of piece of shit steals a guy's wife's wedding band?" And Eddie says, "Shut the fuck up. I took it."
Yeah. Spanish Raymond, we did business with him for years. Spanish Raymond. Yeah. I know a lot of guys that sold all that dope that got stolen out of that got stolen years later from the NYPD. I know I was away with a lot of guys from the Genovese crew that were moving that heroin.
Wow.
When it was getting stolen. Yeah.
Yeah, that was never solved, right?
No, never. No. They confiscated and they took it all back out. Yeah. They sold it. Joe Beck was one of the main guys. He was a captain with the Genovese crew. He was one of the main guys that was getting his hands on that heroin. Yeah. Wow. Those were the good old days. Yeah, right? Well, listen, thanks for tuning in, man. Appreciate it.
I understand your accounts of the treatment center, what I do to be there, but I have to manage this alone. My only question is, my friends have not quit cocaine, and it's only me who makes the effort to quit, but I relapse often. My cleanest is 5 years, and I'm currently 8 months clean. I'm 27 years old. I would just like to know how you think I should progress. Do I cut my childhood friends out, or do I lay down rules in regard to using around me? I really need advice of a man like you who has been there where I am and got out of that life. I'm at the point where suicide has become an option. I don't normally reach out, but this is me reaching out. Thank you, sir. Yours faithfully.
Oh, that's heavy. So the best thing I could say is you have to make a decision to put your recovery first. So my first priority is my recovery. So in order for me to recover, I have to make the hard decisions. I have to do the things I don't want to do. So if my goal is not to use no matter what, and recovery is my top priority, I need to stay away from people that are using. That's the bottom line. The bottom line is the 3 biggest triggers for a recovering addict are people, places, and things. In order for me to stay clean and recover, I have to change the people I stay with. I got to change the things I do, and I got to stay and change the places I go to. Those are the three biggest triggers. You know, there's a saying in recovery that when you hang out in a barber shop, sooner or later, you're going to get a haircut. So that's the same thing if I'm staying with people that are using cocaine or alcohol or whatever they're using, sooner or later, I'm going to join in. How do I know that? Because the first year I tried to get clean, I relapsed 3 times. And every time I relapsed, it was because I was with people I didn't belong with, doing the things I had no business doing, and the places I shouldn't have been going to. Clubs, discos, out with girls that were using, hanging out with people that had coke on them, and I picked up. You have to make a decision to put your recovery first. And then if your friends are using and they're really your true friends and you stay away from them, they would understand. You know, when I first got clean, I was only clean after I got clean after my 3rd relapse, and I really decided to get clean. One of my best friends got married, one of my best friends, and I only had a couple of months clean. And I went to his wedding in Manhattan, and everybody was blowing coke, and everybody was offering it to me. And it got to the point where I would say no, and like they would say, "What are you kidding?" Like nobody understood why I didn't want to blow coke with them in the bathroom. And it got to the point where I got so uncomfortable that it was either leave or get high. So I put my recovery first. I got up, I went to my friend, one of my best friends, childhood friends. I went to him and his wife, and I said, "Listen, I got to get out of here." I said, "If I stay here, I'm going to wind up using." I gave him my envelope. He kissed me. He goes, "Listen, before you get high at my wedding, go." And I left because I made a decision to put my recovery first. What you need to do with someone in this position that sent this email needs to do is go to a meeting, go to a 12-step meeting, raise your hand, introduce yourself, and say what's going on. And people will reach out to you, get phone numbers, go to people, get their phone numbers. You have to stay with people. If you want to recover, you got to stay with people that are recovered. If you want to use, then stay with people that are using. That's the bottom line. You have to do the things you don't want to do. Of course, you don't want to give up your childhood friends, but listen, if they're really your true friends, they'll understand what you're trying to do. And that's it, because, you know, they'll get you high a lot faster than you'll get them clean.